We're going to get started بإذن الله تعالى. أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. الحمد لله رب العالمين والصلاة والسلام على سيدنا محمد أشرف الخلق وسيد المرسلين وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين. اللهم لا سهل إلا ما جعلته سهلا وأنت تجعل الحزن إذا شئت سهلا سهلا. رب اشرح لي صدري ويسر لي أمري واحلل عقدة من لساني يفقهوا قولي. اللهم أخرجنا من ظلمات الوهم إلى نور الفهم وأكرمنا بمعرفة العلم وزين أخلاقنا بالحلم يا أرحم الراحمين. اللهم علمنا ما ينفعنا وانفعنا بما علمتنا وزدنا علما واجعل علمنا حجة لنا لا علينا. Oh Allah, we call upon you, pray to you, beseech you, we ask you by names and attributes to bless us with fiqh of our deen, understanding our deen, bless us with beneficial knowledge and allow us to benefit from what we learn and make our knowledge proof for us, not against us on the day of judgment. Oh Allah, we ask you to fill our hearts with the nur of guidance and to make us steadfast upon the right path and to make us of those who are deeply committed to our deen, our Islam, to understanding the Quran and the Sunnah of our Prophet ﷺ and the teachings of our righteous predecessors. We ask you, O Allah, to make us true students of knowledge, those whom the angels pray for and seek forgiveness for, those whom the animals and the trees and everything that you've created pray for and seek forgiveness for. We ask you, Allah, to shower this gathering with your mercy and to surround it with your angels and to guide us to the best of speech and the best of actions. Ya Rabbil Alameen, Ameen, Ameen. Wa akhiru da'wana alhamdulillahi Rabbil Alameen. Amma ba'd. Inshallah, today we're going to be continuing with our class on Fiqh of Salah. And today's our third class. We're going to be continuing with two subjects. Last week, what did we cover? Last week, what was the title of the subject that we covered from the book? You guys know? Anyone know? You remember? Anyone remember? Come on, guys. We got a review from week to week. We got to take notes. Radwan noticed that we have tables out, but no one's taking notes. Radwan told me this last week. So we need to, this is a majlis ilm. The only way we're going to get knowledge if we exert ourselves in seeking knowledge. If we just listen to it, it's going to go through one ear and out the other. Especially a knowledge like fiqh. Fiqh is very detailed. It needs a lot of focus, a lot of review, a lot of study, and effort. So please try to push yourselves, inshallah. If you don't have the book, by the way, is there still people here who were looking for the book but don't have it? Anyone still here? A few people? All right, so there's copies of the book. I know they're somewhere. Hamza, is Hamza around? Or Shuaib, if you could see with Brother Radwan where the books are, that'd be appreciated, inshallah. So anyway, last week we went over the conditions obligating prayer. Shurut wujub as-salah. That's, and we went over a lot of details relating to what is taklif, what's bulugh, what does it mean to be sound of mind, and a lot of details you could find on the recording that we have for last week's session. Today, we're going to go over two subjects. The first of these starts on page 48 in the book, the accessible conspectus. And it is the times of the prescribed prayers, mawaqit as-salah. And the second one is as-salawat al-masnoona. I want to try our best to get through both because we want to finish the whole chapter by the time December comes, inshallah. So, as-salawat al-masnoona is a very big subject. What are the recommended prayers? So, we're going to start with the first subject, the times of the prescribed prayers. A lot of this knowledge, so some of this is important to know, but a lot of it no longer is applicable for us because we just follow the adhan apps and the prayer times are already stated for us, and we don't need to take the extra effort in trying to figure out the time of prayer. But it's important to know some of this information that and its origin. The first thing that's important to know is where do these prayer times come from? There is a hadith, it's called the hadith of Imamat Jibreel bin Nabi sallallahu alayhi wasallam. The hadith in which Jibreel alayhi salam led the Prophet sallallahu alayhi wasallam in prayers. This is what gave us as an ummah guidance on what the prayer times are. The Prophet ﷺ said, أَمَّنِي جِبْرِيلٌ عِنْدَ الْبَيْتِ مَرَّتَيْنِ. Jibreel led me in 2 different days, twice for each prayer. He led Dhuhr the first time, and then he mentioned a certain position for the sun. He said, حِينَ كَانَ الْفَيْءُ مِثْلَ الشِّرَاكِ. He led me when there was hardly any shade. Very little shade, except the typical shade that you'd find for an object at high noon. This is when the sun is in the middle of the sky, at its zenith. At its zenith, what does that mean? When it's at its highest point. At that time, it has very little shade. And then he goes on to say, ثُمَّ صَلَّى الْعَصْرِ حِينَ كَانَ كُلُّ شَيْءٍ مِثْلَ ظِلَّيْهِ. Then he said, he led me on that same day in Asr prayers when everything had a shade double its size. That's the beginning of Asr. And then he goes on to say, ثُمَّ صَلَّى الْمَغْرِبِ حِينَ وَجَبَتِ الشَّمْسُ وَأَفْطَرَ الصَّائِمِ. He led me in Maghrib as soon as the sun set and it was no longer seen in the horizon, and it was the time of iftar for the one who was fasting. Then he led me in prayers when the twilight disappeared. ثُمَّ صَلَّى الْعِشَاءِ حِينَ غَابَ الشَّفَقِ. One of the words you're going to need to know in this section is this word called twilight. It's nice to be familiar with nature and how the sun sets and how the sun rises and the different twilights it goes through. This connection that they had with nature was very deep. It ran deep in every aspect of their lives. In our lives, because of sun pollution, because of technology, we've become divorced from these natural signs, largely speaking. So some of this stuff is going to be unfamiliar territory for many. So write that word down somewhere. I hope you have come with a pen, or at least you can write notes in your on your phone or something. Write the word twilight. Right? I'll send you guys a video on the group that shows you the different twilights as they're transitioning. Right? ثم صلى الفجر حين برق الفجر وحرم الطعام على الصائم. Then in the next day, he led us in Fajr. He led me. Jibreel led me. He led me in Fajr. The next prayer was Fajr time. He led Fajr as soon as Fajr came in, when it was no longer allowed for someone fasting to eat. And we're going to explain when was that exactly. وصلى في المرة الثانية الظهر حين كان ظل كل شيء مثله. Then in the second day, he led me in dhuhr, when everything had a shade the size of it. You guys all following along? It's all going to become clear when we read the section, inshallah. This is just an intro, an overview. Tamam? Afterwards, just leave him on the side now. Okay. All right. So again, he led in the second day when it was everything had a shade the size of it. The first day, it had very little shade, right? Right. Then he goes on to say, he led Asr, ثم صلى العصر حين كان ظل كل شيء مثليه ثم صلى المغرب لوقته الأول. Right. So in the second day, he led Asr at the same time he led it in the first day, when everything had double the shade. And then he led Maghrib the same time he led it in the first day. Then he prayed Isha when a third of the night had passed. Then he led Fajr when there was what we call Isfar. Isfar is when it was no longer very dark. It was sort of a dusky appearance. You could see things and make them out. There was like a whitish glow in the sky right before sunrise. He said that's what we call Isfar. ثم التفت إلي جبريل فقال يا محمد هذا وقت الأنبياء قبلك والوقت فيما بين هذين الوقتين. He said this is the time for the prophets before you, and this is the prayer times that you guys have as well. And the time should be prayed within these time frames. So now we're going to go in detail. What is this and what is it talking about? So if you guys notice from this hadith, what was the first prayer that he prayed? Which was the first prayer that he led the Prophet ﷺ in? Dhuhr. In fact, one of the reasons they say it was called Dhuhr, لأنها أول صلاة ظهرت في الإسلام. They say Dhuhr comes from Dhahara. What is Dhahara? Dhahara means to appear. One reason why it was called Dhuhr was because of Waqt al-Dhahira. It's in the broad daylight. the middle of the day. The other reason was because it is the first prayer to appear in the history of Islam, the first obligatory prayer to appear in the history of Islam. So that's one thing to note from the hadith. The other thing to note from the hadith is that prayers have time slots. So that means you could perform it during its time slot or after its time slot, and each one has a name. If you perform the prayer during its time slot, does anyone know the term that we call that? If you've never studied fiqh before, you might not know. We call this ada. Ada means to perform the prayer in its time. How do you spell that in English? A-D-A-A with an apostrophe in the end. Ada. What's the opposite of ada? Qada. Ada, we have ada on one end and then we have qada on the other end. Qada is to pray the prayer after its time slot has concluded. When its time slot finishes, we call this qada. If you were to repeat a prayer during its time slot, this has a third term. This is called i'ada. I'ada. I'ada means repetition. Why on earth would you repeat a prayer during its time slot? You have any idea? Because you've made a mistake? Not exactly, no. If you made a mistake and the prayer is invalid, that means you never actually fulfilled it. So you're still going to do it ada on time. Why would you repeat a prayer? Huh? No, that means the first time didn't count if you prayed it before the time. Why would you repeat that prayer? Yeah. There you go. You'd repeat a prayer for the purpose of jama'ah, right? Like say if you missed jama'ah, or for the purpose of seeking more reward. I prayed it alone by myself, now I have an opportunity to pray with a group. You know what, I'm going to repeat my dhuhr because I want more reward, right? So this is what we call i'ada, to pray the prayer a second time, even though the first time was completed in a sound way. So these are three terms: ada, qada, i'ada. When is a prayer considered on time and when is it considered qada? When is it considered ada and when is it considered qada? They say that in order for it to be considered on time, you need to finish one full rak'ah, one full unit of prayer during the time. If you do not even finish one full unit, then it's considered qada. Now, this has nothing to do with reward or sin. That's a different subject. That's a different subject. We're going to talk about that because can you leave a prayer to a time frame where you can't actually complete it during the time? The answer to this is no. If you intentionally do that, then you've committed a sin. If I leave dhuhr until there is only 2 minutes left in the prayer time, we call this waqtu hurma, a time of prohibition. Because you cannot comply with the command to pray during dhuhr with 2 minutes remaining in it. So if you intentionally delayed it till that point, you've committed a sin. You guys with me? But it's considered on time, but may be sinful, depending on why did you delay it till then. Sometimes you didn't intentionally delay it. I woke up, and there's 5 minutes left for Fajr. And I race to make wudu and prepare myself for Salah. And I catch one rak'ah, and as I'm going to the second rak'ah, I hear the sound for duha coming in go off on my phone. Did I catch it on time? Yes. If I finished the rak'ah during the prayer, or if I had the capacity to finish the rak'ah during the time, then it's considered on time. What do you mean if I had the capacity? One time during the time of the companions, they prolonged Fajr prayers and they led a long prayer. And they did not finish until the sun had risen. So afterwards, they commented on this. And it was said, if it was to rise, it would not rise upon us while we're in a state of ghafla. Meaning that if someone doesn't finish during the prayer time because they're praying a long prayer, that's not held against them, of course. But technically, in order for you to consider having caught the time, you need to finish one rak'ah during the time. or else it's categorized as qada. Does everyone understand that with me? If you look at page 49, he'll tell you the noon prayer. What are we going to do now? The time for the noon prayer begins with the sun passing its zenith. What does its zenith mean again? Its highest point in the sky, right? When it passes over, right? The sun rises from where? Where does the sun rise from? Please don't tell me the west. No. You got a cookie in your mouth? I'm sorry. I put you on the spot there. All right. So the sun rises from, unless it's the day of judgment, it rises from the east, right? And it sets in the west. And as soon as it passes the midway point to here, where's the shade going to be? All right, so when the sun's coming up from the east, say if someone's standing right here, where's his shade going to be as the sun's on this side? This side or this side? It's going to be this side, right? The shade's going to, and then the shade's going to continue to decrease until it's at midpoint like this. And then we're going to have what we call dhillu shakhis. It's just a minimum dhil, a minimum amount of shade for something that's an obstruction in the ground or something standing tall in the ground, whatever it is, a person or a thing or whatever you want to call it. Then once it switches over to this side, where's the shade going to be? It's going to be on this side. It's going to be ever increasing until it reaches the size of the object, two sides of the object, and then after that, we're going to enter the end time of Asr. And that's what we're going to call the yellowness in the sky, the time of isfirar. So let's read it from the book just so it's clear. The sun is at its zenith when it's at the highest point it will be for that day. The shadow cast by an object shortens as the sun approaches its zenith. The shadow stops shortening once the sun reaches its zenith. Once it passes, it starts lengthening again on the other side. We already went over that. And then he gives you an example of how that would work. So he says the time for noon starts at that point, and then it continues until the time for Asr. Is there a gap time between Dhuhr and Asr? No. You go from Dhuhr into Asr. Is there a gap time between Asr and Maghrib? No, there isn't. Is there a gap time between Maghrib and Isha? The answer is no, there isn't. Is there a gap time between Isha and Fajr? According to the opinion of the majority, no, there isn't. Isha continues until Fajr. Right? There is an opinion out there that says it continues until midnight, but that's not the opinion of the majority of scholars, and it's not the opinion that we're learning here. You could continue to pray Isha until Fajr time comes in. Right? The only gap that we have between the prayers is between Fajr and Dhuhr. That's the only gap that we have between the prayers. So anyway, he goes on to say the time for the mid-afternoon prayer begins when the length of an object's shadow minus its shadow at the zenith is greater than the object's height. All right, now when the shadow is bigger, we're in Asr time. You got it? So up until the shadow becomes the size of the object, so like for example, say that this is 2 feet, right? Once the shadow reaches past 2 feet, then we've entered the time of Asr, for example. That's how they used to do it in the past. Now, of course, this is all contingent upon there being a sun. They had other ways of calculation, right? They had they didn't only have a sundial. They also had the thing that measures time, the sand. What is it? Power. There you go. The power glass. And they had other forms of telling time as well. But earlier on, that's what they would use. They'd use the sundial, and they would use this measurement when there was sun. Anyway, he goes on to say the following. The time, he said, this is the length of the, all right, so it continues. So it starts at when we get past the size of the object and continues until when? It gets double the size. Then what happens after that? We enter the end time of Asr. And that's when you don't really see as much shine, rather the sky starts becoming yellowish, right? The time for sunset prayer, and then he goes on, so Asr, this is about 20 minutes before Maghrib time. There's an isfirar, it goes from yellowness to a red glow, And then after the red glow, the sun disappears. And then there remains a redness in the sky. Have any of you guys ever gone to the desert before? If you go to the desert, you could see this a lot better. Or have gone to a region where there's not much sunlight, not much light pollution. If you go there, you'll see this much more clear, much clearer. Inshallah, I'll send you guys a video so that you could see this happen, with the time-lapse thing. There's videos out there that show you the time-lapse. So we go from yellowness to redness, and then the redness continues throughout Maghrib time. It's not fully dark during Maghrib time. Then, after that, towards the end of Maghrib, there comes a whiteness in the sky. And then after Isha comes in, it gets completely dark. After Isha comes in, it gets completely dark. Then he goes on to mention to us what the Maghrib time is here. He mentions in the book that there's this opinion that says the time for Maghrib is very short. It's actually enough time that you need to fulfill the prayer and finish it. That's the time for Maghrib. But the other opinion, and it's the more authentic opinion in the Shafi'i school, is that Maghrib continues until Isha time. Until the red glow disappears from the sky. Until the red glow disappears from the sky. Now, this is all good, but we want to break down the prayer times. When should I pray? When should I pray? There's a breakdown for each prayer. There is a time of virtue. When do you think the time of virtue to pray a prayer is? Very beginning. After adhan. Soon after adhan. For nearly all of the prayers. And actually for all the prayers, because the Prophet ﷺ was asked which action is best. أَيُّ الْأَعْمَالِ أَفْضَلِ. So he said ﷺ, الصَّلَاةُ لِوَقْتِهَا. The Prophet ﷺ was asked which of the actions is better. He said the prayer at its time. That's the beginning of the prayer time. And then you have a continuation of this without it being makruh to delay. It's allowable to delay. You're not doing anything offensive or wrong until towards the end of the prayer. Some prayer times have a waqt of karaha, and they all have a waqt of hurma. When is it makruh to delay a prayer to? For example, for Asr, they say it is makruh to delay Asr until the time of isfirar, yellowness in the sky. Meaning when there's only 20 minutes left for Asr, approximately. It's makruh to leave Asr till then. It would be haram to leave any prayer until the time where there's not enough time to finish it, like 5 minutes or less. It'd be haram to delay the prayer to that time. All right? All following along with me? When would it be? It would be makruh to delay Maghrib. Maghrib it's makruh to delay it past the first part of its time. Meaning, the time it takes for you to make wudu after adhan and prepare yourself for salah. So most of the time of Maghrib, this is makruh. It's makruh to delay it. Because Maghrib especially, its time is very short. And especially because I told you there's a difference of opinion about the time for Maghrib, whether it extends to Isha or not. And there's another difference of opinion about when does Isha enter? Is it when the red glow disappears or the white glow disappears? Now, these are the twilights again. Which one disappears first, the red or the white? Try to think with me about how the sky looks. The redness is from what? It's from the sun. So it's the one that's going to go first. The whiteness, this is just after effects. This is after effects. So the whiteness is delayed a little bit. So they say it's makruh to leave Maghrib after the beginning of its time. It's makruh to leave Asr until the yellowness comes into the sky. And they say it's makruh to leave Isha until after false dawn. False dawn. Have you ever heard this term before, false dawn? Has anyone here ever heard of false dawn? What's false dawn? Okay, أنا ما أظنش حد سمعك. All right, so Fajr Kadhib is, we have two types of light. If you're in the darkness of the desert, you will see this light that comes vertical in the horizon. And then you'll see darkness after it. And then after about 20 minutes, you will see this streak of light horizontal in the horizon. Just like a can opener. SubhanAllah. Just like a can opener. So the first light that you see vertical, it's perpendicular to the, so if this is the horizon, it's going to come like this, perpendicular to the horizon. This is the false dawn. It's about 20 minutes before true dawn. Right? Then after it comes, this is not the time of Fajr yet. That's why they call it false dawn. This is when Bilal used to make adhan. We used to have two adhans for Fajr. One of them at false dawn and the other one at true dawn. False dawn is to let people know that it's almost time for Fajr. So if you're going to fast, make sure you stop eating soon. And if you're going to wake up now. Right? Then we have Abdullah ibn Maktoum. He would make adhan at true dawn. And again, it's like a can opener. If you've ever gone to the masjid at Fajr time, you can notice this. You'll notice that one side of the sky is dark and the other side is light. It's like a white glow. And it's like it slowly increases until the whole sky becomes whitish in appearance. And then we go from whitish to what? Whitish to what comes after that? The redness, right? If any of you guys like taking pictures of the sun, you're going to see that at the sunrise, very bright red. And then after the redness, yellowness. It's the opposite of what we see at sunset. Sunset, you see yellowness first, then redness. Then after Maghrib finishes, the redness goes and there's a little bit of whiteness, and even that goes with Isha, right? Then when it comes for Fajr time, it's the opposite. This is a little bit about how this works. So again, it is makruh to leave Isha until past false dawn, which is 20 minutes before Fajr. So Fajr is 5 a.m. If it is 4:40, it's makruh to pray Isha that late. Well, of course, I hope that you wouldn't leave it that late because it comes in, like 8 p.m. So why would you leave it till 4 or 4:40? Unless you've been working and you have a night shift or something like that, that's a different story. But again, that's the makruh time for, generally speaking, for dhuhr time, especially for asr time, there is a slight delay in the beginning of asr because there's a hadith that says that asr should be delayed for a approximate time. The way the Prophet ﷺ approximated it was the amount it takes to do salkh shah, to remove the skin from a sheep. Now, of course, for someone who's very trained, like Ridwan or something like that, and he's a butcher, if for a very trained butcher, it's not going to take very long to do that. Maybe, say, 15 minutes, 20 minutes. That's an approximation in terms of when Asr should be delayed to. But even if it was prayed at the beginning of its time, it would still be in line with that hadith that says the best thing you could do is pray a prayer on its time, right? There are some who say it's recommended to delay a prayer past its time, like for Isha. But that's not, there's a difference of opinion about that. The more authentic opinion in the Shafi'i school is no, it's better to pray in the beginning of its time. There's some who say it's better to delay Isha until a third of the night has passed. Right, a third of the night has. So for example, if Maghrib comes in at 6 and Fajr comes in at 6, that means a third of the night is how many hours? How many hours is a third of the night? 6 to 6, 12 hours, right, in the night. So how many hours is a third? 4 hours. So they would say it's recommended to leave Isha until about 10 p.m. This opinion. But the authentic opinion in the Shafi'i school says, no, pray in the beginning of its time. Alhamdulillah. If Isha came in at 7 and you wanted to pray at 10, you're going to pray by yourself. No one's going to come to the masjid. Everyone's going to want to pray it earlier on. But anyway, that's just a little bit about the prayer times. Now, the other thing, so we said there's something called the twilights, right? You guys followed me when I said that, the twilights? So we have 3 twilights. There's one that's called astronomic twilight, and then another one that's called civic twilight, nautical twilight, and civic twilight. These are the 3. You could look them up. And they're basically when the degree points, when daylight begins or ends. Now I want you guys have the Adhan app on your phone? If you have the Adhan app on your phone, can you please open it? Open your Adhan app. If you're opening your Adhan app now, when does it say, when does it say Fajr comes in? 5:40? Mine says 5:40, yours says 5:42, Hajj Anis? It's close. All right. Now I just got to wait for this commercial to finish because I don't have the paid version. All right, let me get out of it and go back in it. If you go to your settings, go to app settings for your Adhan app. And under prayers, you're going to see calculation method. You guys see that? All right. What's your calculation method at? 15 degrees or North American. North American, this is referring to ISNA, Islamic Society of North America. This calculation method, 15 degrees, was decided upon very, very, very long ago, decades ago. And if you change it, put, like for example, Muslim World League, مثلا. When do you see Fajr now? You guys see that? 5:24 on Muslim World League. If you put Qura, which is 18.5 degrees, it's going to be even a little earlier than that. If you put a 19 degrees, it's going to be even a little earlier than that as well. Now, that's about 20-minute difference. Depending on the time of the year, you'll find a 20-minute difference between the ISNA, North American method, 15 degrees, and the other degree methods. Now, this is a very big area of study that the scholars have. When does daylight enter? It's not a madhab-based thing, by the way. It's not like Shafi'i, Hanafi, Maliki. We're talking about scholars of astronomy. When can we pinpoint when daylight enters? It's all dealing with these twilights. Now, if you were to wake at 5:20 today, if you were to wake up at 5:20 a.m. and look outside, it's going to be very dark. That doesn't mean that Fajr could not have entered by then. It could have, but the higher the degree, the darker it will be outside. The lower the degree, the lighter it's going to be outside. This is an area of, some scholars, they say that there's no 1 degree method for the whole world. It depends on where you are. If you're closer to the equator, if you're more north, depending on where you are, you might need to follow a different degree method. Now, of course, the general thing is like, well, I'm not an astronomer. How am I supposed to know? How am I supposed to figure this out? In general, we tell people, be precautious. If there's precaution for your fasting, and then there's precaution for your prayers. So, precaution for your prayers would mean what? What would be the precautious thing for your prayers to do? Like right now, if I told you, all right, that some say that Fajr comes in at 5:25, but there's some who say Fajr only comes in at 5:40. What would the precautious thing to be for your prayers? What would it be? Huh? It would be to delay your prayers a little bit, to make sure that you don't pray it too soon. That'd be the precautious thing. Unless it's absolutely necessary for you to pray sooner than that, then that's a different story. But in general, be precautious for your prayers, and also be precautious for your fasting. What would be the precautious thing to do for your fasting when it comes to these degree methods? If someone tells you, according to this calculation method, Fajr came in at 5:20. According to this other one, 5:20, it comes in at 5:45. What would be the precautious thing for your fasting? 5:20, right? That would be the, did someone say 5:45? Yeah, if someone said 5:45, that's if you want to get a few extra minutes to have some potatoes and some eggs and some coffee. But if you want precaution, then it would be to stop a little earlier, right? All right. So as lay people in this regard, just follow your judgment. Be precautious as best as you can, unless it makes your life real difficult, and know that you have some area of difference to maneuver. Now, there's something interesting here that he mentions in the book on the bottom of page 50. We don't have to deal with this, but other people do. People in extreme latitudes. Look what he says. The time for the night prayer begins when the red in the sky disappears. Something to note is that night begins when the sun sets, but the time for the night prayer does not begin until all of the red has left the sky. At this time, there will be typically some white light on the horizon. In extreme latitudes, the red glow may not leave the sky. So what am I supposed to do? There's a fatwa, modern fatwa, in this type of situation. What do we do? Like, what do you mean by extreme latitudes? By the way, guys, the latest Isha gets here is how late? How late the latest Isha gets here? Around 10:10. In the UK, for example, Isha could get as late as midnight. Very late. In other places, like in Norway or Sweden, in the extreme north, you will find that their night is actually very short. It could, as in some times of the year, when Ramadan was in summer, it was very, very difficult for some of the people in these areas. You're talking about 2 or 3 hours of night, and it doesn't get fully dark. The redness stays in the sky. So what do? People in those regions, they follow the closest country to them where the redness disappears. That's the fatwa for them. And that's usually 90 minutes. 90 minutes. So if it takes 90 minutes for the glow to disappear after sunset in the nearest land, then their night prayer will also begin 90 minutes after the sun. So 90 minutes is an example. So that's how that type of situation is dealt with. In the end of the section, he tells you about true dawn. He tells you about isfar. Its preferred time extends until a yellow glow appears on the horizon. And its permissible time extends to the rise. That's talking about Asr. About Fajr. That's pretty much the prescribed prayer times. Does anyone have any questions on that before I go to the recommended prayers? Anyone have questions about, yeah. Of course. Like, for example, you're talking about, say if you weren't able to pray earlier, but now there's only 2 minutes left until Maghrib. Should you pray at that time? Is that what you're talking about? So you should pray your prayers in order. You should not pray Asr after Maghrib. You should avoid doing this as best as you can, because according to the majority of scholars, it's not allowed, aslan. According to the Shafi'i school, it is allowed, but it's makruh. It's offensive to do that. So no, there is no, pay attention, we're going to go over the prohibited prayer times. That's something different. There is no prohibited prayer time for a fard prayer. You pray it as soon as you can, right? But what we're talking about here is for you to delay until then without excuse is haram. You got it? But there's no prohibited prayer time. Jazakallah khair. Yes. Yes. Mm-hmm. No, I don't recommend you ijma' with dhuhr. So praying, so look, you can't pray a prayer before its time unless you have one of the valid excuses that we're going to learn about. You can't pray Asr during the time of dhuhr just based on your discretion. There needs to be a legitimate cause that is stated in Islamic law for you to combine prayers. You got it? So, and then, you praying it in the makruh time is okay. It's valid still. It's on time. But if you miss that even because of traffic and you can't pray in any other location because you don't feel safe or something like that, then in that case, you just do qada of it in that type of situation. All right? Inshallah. Any other questions relating to the prayer times? Tfaddal. Afwan? Fajr ends once Qurs al-Shams, once the disk of the sun starts appearing on the horizon. Once it starts showing, that's when the Fajr time ends. So leading up to that, you will start seeing redness in the sky, and very close to that redness, that's when the sun starts appearing. Sunrise, right? That's when it ends. Allah. Yeah. So the time differences that you'll see in the app are for Isha and for Fajr. What do you mean use them for your advantage? You're just putting yourself in a shubha. You can use it to your advantage. It's not really to your advantage. When you delay prayers that late, you're at a disadvantage. Yeah. So, and it's not a big difference, by the way. I think it's like when we look at Isha, I think it's 10 minutes. Let me check. Bismillah. So if you look at Isha today at the Muslim World League, you'll see that it's at 8:03. Over there it's 7. So Isha is not as big of a difference as Fajr. So it's a 10-minute difference. If that's gonna, it's not really an advantage. Don't leave your salat till that late. That's what you should take away from this. Try your best to pray on time. All right? Barakallah feekum. All right, let's go to the next subject. The next subject's much, has a lot in it. The next subject is this recommended prayers. The recommended prayers. Bismillah. Bismillah. So on 53 in the book, he gives us some of the recommended prayers. This section does not give us all of the recommended prayers, by the way. It says in this, وَالصَّلَوَاتُ الْمَسْنُونَاتُ خَمْسٌ الْعِيدَانِ وَالْكُسُوفَانِ وَالْإِسْتِسْقَاءِ والسنن التابعة للفرائض 17 ركعة ركعتا الفجر وأربع قبل الظهر وركعتان بعدها وأربع قبل العصر وركعتان بعد المغرب وثلاث بعد العشاء يوتر بواحدة منهن. All right, so this is what he starts out by saying this section. He goes over the recommended prayers. He starts off with the best of the recommended prayers. Take this as a principle for you guys. Which recommended prayers are best? The ones in which Jama'ah is recommended. The ones, Jazakallah khair, the ones in which Jama'ah is recommended. Which ones are those? They are 5. There are 5 recommended prayers that are recommended to be done in Jama'ah. What are they? The 2 Eid prayers, Eid al-Adha and Eid al-Fitr. According to the majority of scholars, these are recommended prayers, not obligatory prayers. According to the Hanafi school, these 2 are actually wajib. They're obligatory. These 2 are actually obligatory. Eid al-Adha and Eid al-Fitr, according to the Hanafi school, is wajib. And that's why these prayers are the most virtuous of prayers of them all. Because there's a difference of opinion about the ruling on them. So al-Eidan, لأنه قيل بوجوبهما. Some said these are obligatory. Then we have al-Kusuf. Wal-Khusuf, the lunar eclipse prayer and the solar eclipse prayer. The lunar eclipse prayer and the solar eclipse prayer. These are the next 2. So how many do we have so far? 4. What's the 5th one? Then the rain prayer or Salat al-Istisqa. This is when you seek the rains. So these are the 5 prayers that are recommended to be done in jama'ah. What does it mean for them to be recommended to be done in jama'ah? It means you get extra reward, or you're rewarded for fulfilling the sunnah of doing them in jama'ah. Right? This is what it means. What do we mean by that exactly? All right, what don't you have here? You don't have Qiyamul Layl here, right? Qiyamul Layl isn't one of the sunan that is recommended to be done in the jama'ah, in the sense that you won't get extra reward for doing it in jama'ah, right? You won't get extra reward for doing it in jama'ah, but can you do it in jama'ah? Yes, there's no problem with that. There's no problem for you to do Qiyamul Layl in jama'ah, but you won't get extra reward for doing that, okay? But maybe it'll help you, because you need someone to encourage you, and in that case, it's fine. No problem. All right. What's the next prayer? All right, so he mentions, each of these has their own section. They're going to come later on. That's why we're not going to go over how do you do Eid prayers, how do you do the eclipse prayers, how do you do the rain prayers. There's separate sections for each of these. What does he mention next? After these 5, we go over witr. Why witr? Well, he doesn't do that in the book, but this is what I'm going to go over. The next one in the order of virtue is witr prayers. Why is witr number 6 after those 5? Because it is the first of the prayers that are not recommended to be done in jama'ah that there's a dispute about. Some of them say it's an emphasized sunnah to do witr, and some of them say it's wajib. The Hanafi school says it's wajib to do witr. The majority of scholars say it is sunnah mu'akkada. What does sunnah mu'akkada mean? Emphasize sunnah. It means it is something the Prophet ﷺ consistently did throughout his life, and he only abandoned due to a special circumstance. All right? Now, of course, witr has a lot of virtues to it. And when is the time for witr? The time for witr starts from Isha until Fajr. You could pray it at any point in then, between then. There's some of the virtues that mention it. The Prophet ﷺ said, "Inna Allaha witrun yuhibbul witr." Allah Azza wa Jal is witr, meaning He is unique. No one is like Him, subhanah. And Allah loves witr prayers. That's what the Prophet ﷺ said. Allah loves the witr prayers. I just want to ask the sisters in the corner if you could please stop talking. صوتكم مسموع أخوات في الخلف جزاكم الله خير. So that's when the time is. When should you pray it? Should you pray it before you go to sleep, or at the end of the night? The most virtuous thing is to leave your witr as the last prayer you do in the night. Now we have 2 examples. We have Abu Bakr and we have Umar. Abu Bakr radiallahu anhu used to do witr in the end of the night because he knew he was going to do qiyam. Umar radiallahu anhu would do witr before he would go to sleep, to ensure that he does it. Right? If I do witr, can I pray after it? The answer is yes, you can. But you should not do witr again, because the Prophet ﷺ said, "La witrani fi layla." You should not perform witr twice in one night. You should not do witr twice in one night. So that's about, what are the number of rak'ahs for witr? There's a minimum, 1 rak'ah. And then there's a maximum, this might throw you off a little bit, 11. There's 11 rak'ahs, as they say, is the maximum for witr. Right? What's the adna al-kamal, the minimum of what's considered a complete sunnah? 3 rak'ahs. 1 is the minimum, 3 is adna al-kamal, you fulfill the full sunnah, 3 rak'ahs. And then you have all the way up until 11 rak'ahs. How should you perform witr? If you're praying 1 rak'ah, it's straightforward. If you're doing 3 rak'ahs or more, how should you do it? You have a few different ways to do it. One way is to pray them 3 consecutive rak'ahs with a tashahhud in the very end. Right? 3 consecutive rak'ahs with a tashahhud in the end. This is tariq al-wasl, the way of connecting. Right? بتشهد في الأخير. So you either, if you're praying 3 rak'ahs, you're either going to disconnect or connect. Right? If you're going to connect them, you could connect them one of 2 ways. You either, you have either one way, doing 1 tashahhud in the end, 3 consecutive rak'ahs, like I just said. Got it? Or you pray it like Maghrib, right? With 2 tashahuds, right? 2 rak'ahs, tashahud, then 1 rak'ah, tashahud. This is the least favorable way according to the Shafi'i school. However, this is the way that the Hanafi school does it. So if you go to a masjid where they follow the Hanafi school, you will see they do witr just like we do Maghrib. They do witr just like we do Maghrib. Why is this the least favorable way to do it? Because there is a hadith that prohibits making witr like Maghrib. That's why. And that's why. And the Shafi'i school authenticates this. The Hanafi school does not. Now, what about tariq al-fasl, disconnecting? The most virtuous way to do witr is tariq al-fasl, disconnect. What does that mean? Pray 2 rak'ahs, say salam, then stand up and pray 1 rak'ah after that. This is the most complete way to do it. All right? The second best is 3 consecutive with 1 tashahhud in the end. And the least favorable is to pray it like Maghrib. Everyone got that with me? Everyone's on the same page with me? Clear in your mind? Now, what if I'm doing witr as 5 rak'ahs? Same thing applies. If I'm going to do tariq al-fasl, I'm going to pray 2 rak'ahs, then say salam, 2 more rak'ahs, then say salam. And I'm having the intention of witr with all of this, by the way. And then 1 rak'ah in the end. Or I could pray 5 straight rak'ahs with 1 tashahhud in the end. I could do that. And there's actually hadiths that show that. There's actually hadiths that show the Prophet ﷺ did witr like this as well. And then the other way, if you want to do two tashahhuds, is to do 4 rak'ahs, then sit down for a tashahhud, and then stand up for 1 more, and do tashahhud again. Clear for your mind? Clear in your mind so far? Same thing if you're going to do 7. Same logic. You're always basically going to keep 1 rak'ah by itself if you're going to do 2 tashahhuds, right? So if I'm doing 7, same thing. Tariq al-fasl, by disconnecting, I'm going to pray 2 rak'ahs, say salam, 2 rak'ahs, say salam, 2 rak'ahs, say salam, and then 1 rak'ah after that. All of this is witr. Sometimes you'll hear them say shafa'. How many of you have heard this word before? Shafa', which means even numbers. There's no such thing as a sunnah called sunnat al-shafa'. Shafa' means the even number of prayers in a witr prayers. If you're praying 3 rak'ahs, the shafa' would be the 2, and then the witr would be the 1. Even though it's all falling under witr prayers. There's no separate sunnah called shafa', which means even. Shafa' means even. The shafa' prayer. Right? Anyway. So, and the same thing would continue all the way until 11 rak'ahs. This is what they say about witr prayers. Does anyone have any questions about that? Anyone have any questions about witr? Go ahead. Huh? Tariqat al-wasl or fasl? Wasl means to connect. Fasl means to disconnect. When you're doing wasl, you have 2 ways to do it. When you're doing fasl, there's 1 way to do it. That's you just say salam between each 2 rak'ahs. تمام؟ تفضل. Yeah, we do. Rasulullah. They say witr is up to 11 rak'ahs. So this is authentic, yes. So here, the hadith that he shares here with you, over here. It's a hadith in Sunan Abi Dawood. He says, ما كان رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم يزيد في رمضان ولا في غيره عن 11 ركعة. The way that we interpret it is, this was all witr. There's other hadith that says, وأدنى الكمال 3 ركعات يقرأ بفاتحة, and then so on and so forth. وينبغي أن, all right, so that's speaking about the qira'ah. So they say that it goes up to 11, and they say that hadith about the Prophet ﷺ not praying inside or outside of Ramadan more than 11 rak'ahs is referring to witr. Because we have other hadith that show in Ramadan he actually prayed 13 and 15, and sometimes he prayed 19. There's a hadith that show these differences. So that means they take this hadith and that, and they say, oh, that means, say that Aisha was referring to witr. Tamam. Yeah. Any other questions? Yeah. Yeah. Well, it's a different sunnah prayer. So you can make, if you want to do some of each. So basically, if you want to do more witr, this would benefit you if you want to do qiyamul layl as well. You want to do more rak'ahs, right? So it's about your intention. Exactly. They're two separate sunnahs. And your intention makes a difference. Of course it does. Yeah. All right. What's the next sunnah that we have here? We have sunnah of, or we have the rawatib. This is actually an important one. Before I mention any other sunnah, let's go over the rawatib. There's a hadith of the Prophet ﷺ that says, "Man salla lillahi fi yawmin thinta ashrata rak'a, bana Allahu lahu baytan fil jannah." Whoever prays to Allah Azza wa Jalla in a day, 12 rak'ahs, Allah will build for him a house in Jannah. Some of them take this hadith to refer to the rawatib that are emphasized. Because what's a ratiba? What's a ratiba? These are the sunnah prayers linked with the fard prayers. Why do we have sunnah prayers linked with the fard prayers? That is to cover any deficiency in focus and concentration in the fard prayers that we would miss. So they're like jawabir. They're like they fill in all the gaps that are in our fard prayers. Like in our fard prayer, you might have been distracted for a rak'ah or 2 or 3, and then you have the sunnah coming in, and it fills the void that was in your fard. So we have among these sunnahs that are linked with the fard prayers, those that the Prophet ﷺ did consistently throughout his life, and other ones that he did sometimes and he abandoned sometimes. How do we do this breakdown? We have 2 for Fajr. These are highly virtuous, emphasized, very emphasized sunnahs, the 2 before Fajr. They're highly virtuous sunnah prayers. And there's a hadith about them that says, رَكْعَتَا الْفَجْرِ خَيْرٌ مِنَ الدُّنْيَا وَمَا فِيهَا. The 2 rak'ahs of Fajr are better than the dunya and all it contains. This is referring to the sunnah. Imagine the fard of Fajr. Imagine the fard of Fajr is even better than that. So, this is 2 before Fajr. Then for Dhuhr, we have the following. We have a minimum of 2 before and 2 after. These are emphasized. So 2 emphasized, then 2 before Dhuhr emphasized, that makes it 4. 2 after Dhuhr emphasized, that makes it how many? 6, right? 2, 2, 2, 6 Hajj. And then we have this hadith among the Sayyidah Aisha where she says, أربع لم يكن يدعهن رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم أربع قبل الظهر. All right. The Prophet ﷺ would never abandon 4 before Dhuhr. So some of them add 2 more before Dhuhr as emphasized. If we do that, how many do we have? 8, right? 2 before Fajr, 4 before Dhuhr, 2 after Dhuhr, giving us 8. What's the next emphasized one? 2 after Maghrib. That gives us how much? 10. Then what's the next emphasized one? 2 after Isha. How much does that give you? 12. So some of them say this hadith of whoever prays 12 rak'ahs for Allah Azza wa Jalla in a day, Allah will build him a house in Jannah. This is referring to the emphasized sunnahs that are linked with the fard. Good? Everyone clear? Clear? All right. Now, let's add the other ones. These are the ones that are not emphasized. The Prophet did them sometimes and didn't do them other times. Let's calculate them. We have 2 more after Dhuhr, giving us a total of how much maximum sunnah you could do with Dhuhr? 4 before, 4 after. Good? You're all with me? 4 before, 4 after? Now, there's a hadith that tells us before Asr, رَحِمَ اللَّهُ امْرَأً صَلَّى قَبْلَ الْعَصْرِ أَرْبَعًا. There's a hadith in Sunan al-Tirmidhi. It says, may Allah have mercy on one who prays 4 before Asr. 4 before Asr. So that, how much does that make it now? Who's following along? 18. So we had 2 before Fajr, 4 before Dhuhr, 4 after. How much is that? 10. 4 before Asr, how much is that? 14. Now let's get to Maghrib. Maghrib, there is a hadith that says, بَيْنَ كُلِّ أَذَانَيْنِ صَلَاةٍ. Between every 2 adhans, meaning adhan and iqamah, that's what it means. Adhanain, yani adhan and iqamah. There is a recommended prayer. So they say, after you hear adhan, For Maghrib, it's recommended you pray 2 rak'ahs before Iqamah of Maghrib. So how much does that make it now? 16, right? Then 2 after Maghrib, that makes it 18. Tamam? What? No, I recounted now. We're counting from the beginning. So 2 before Fajr, 4 before Dhuhr, 4 after Dhuhr, 10, right? 4 before Asr, 14, 2 before Maghrib, 16, 2 after Maghrib, 18, then 2 before Isha, because like we said, بين كل أذانين صلاة, between every 2 adhans is a salah. Then 2 after Isha, how much is that now? 22. Total sunnahs. 12 of them are emphasized, meaning the Prophet ﷺ did them consistently, and 10 of them he did sometimes and he abandoned sometimes. Good? Good? Unclear? Confusing? You need me to count it again? You need me to count it again? One more time? Okay. 2 before Dhuhr, 2 before Fajr, 4 before Dhuhr, 4 after Dhuhr, 4 before Asr, 2 before Maghrib, 2 after Maghrib, 2 before Isha, 2 after Isha. 22. 12 of them are emphasized. Good? Good? Any questions about that? Any questions about the rawatib? تفضل Hajj. We're going to get to it. It's going to come up right now. It's from the recommended prayers. It's one of them. The next one is Salatul Duha. Salatul Duha. You guys all heard of this, right? The sunrise prayer? Huh? Sure, right? You do it every... Allahu Akbar. Allah yataqabbal. Id'ilna ma'ak Hajj. When you do it, make dua for us with you. All right. We have another one that some people refer to as Salat al-Shuruq, right? You guys heard of that? Heard of it before? Is there a difference? They're the same. Some of them use different terminology. Shuruq is when it first comes in, and Duha is the rest of the time after that. Salat al-Duha is a very virtuous prayer. There's a hadith that says about it, من حافظ على شفعة الضحى غفرت له ذنوبه وإن كانت مثل زبد البحر من صلى الضحى ركعتين لم يكتب من الغافلين. There's 2 hadiths. One of them said, whoever prays duha, his sins would be forgiven, even if it was like the foam of the ocean. There's another hadith that says, whoever prays 2 rak'ahs of duha will not be written among the people of ghafla. And then there's another hadith that says, وَلَا يُحَافِظُ عَلَى الضُّحَى إِلَّا أَوَّابٌ. Someone who is awwab, someone who is in a deep state of returning to Allah, repenting to Allah, connecting with Allah, is the one who will stay doing Salat al-Duha. All right. Now, when is Salat al-Duha? Salat al-Duha starts when the sun rises 4 nautical degrees. In the wording of the hadith, they say that this is like the head of a spear, right? Like the head of a spear. This is approximately 4 nautical degrees. What does nautical degrees? Each nautical degree is 4 minutes. So how much after duha does the prayer come in? 4 times 4 is? You sure? Yes. All right, so if it's 6:54 now, when should we wait until we do Salat al-Duha? Huh? 7:10, right? 6:54. We're going to wait 16 minutes. So that's 7:10. Good? You should wait, and you should not pray before then, right? Because it's a prohibited prayer time. It's one of the prohibited prayer times, from sunrise until duha enters. Good? How many raka'at do we have for Salat al-Duha? Minimum 2 and maximum 8. Minimum 2. And if you want to perform the full sunnah for Salat al-Duha, it is 8 rak'ahs. It is 8 rak'ahs. This is according to one. There's actually another opinion. so this is according to Imam al-Ramli. There's another opinion that says that it could go up to 12 rak'ahs. There is an opinion out there that says 12 rak'ahs for duha. So 8 rak'ahs as a maximum according to some, and 12 according to others. All right, that's pretty much. When's the best time to pray it? Some of them say it is recommended to delay duha until a third of the day has passed. Yani say if sunrise comes in at 7 or Fajr comes in at 6 and Maghrib is at 6, a third of the day would be 4 hours, so that'd be 10 a.m. But my recommendation is pray it when you can, because if you wait till the preferred time, you might not have the himmah or the energy to do it. Wallahu a'lam. Any other questions relating to Salat al-Duha? Not Salat al-Fajr. 16 minutes after shuruq. Yeah. There is a hadith that says if you pray Fajr in Jama'ah and you stay in your spot waiting till the sun rises, remembering Allah, and then you pray Duha, then it's like you've done Umrah, complete Umrah. Tamma. Yes. Yeah. Are there preferred surahs to recite during Duha? I don't know offhand. Oh wait, actually, وَالْأَفْضَلْ سُورَةَ الشَّمْسِ وَالضُّحَى وَالْكَافِرُونَ وَالْإِخْلَاص. That's what they say. Allah. Yeah. The sunnah of Jumu'ah? Okay, good question. So, in the Shafi'i school, we believe that Jumu'ah is in place of Dhuhr. And so its sunnah is the same sunnah as the sunnah of Dhuhr. Right? And for that reason, you need to wait until Dhuhr time enters until you pray Jumu'ah, according to the Shafi'i school and the majority. The only ones who say that Jumu'ah prayer is its own prayer, not associated with Dhuhr, they're the Hanbali school. Yeah. So yeah, its sunnah is the same. Its sunnah is the same. But the sunnah on the day of Jumu'ah is to continue to pray until the Imam actually, we're going to talk about this, until the Imam stands on the minbar. If you get there early and you have extra time to remember Allah, it's virtuous to continue to pray until the Imam stands on the minbar. But we'll get to that later on. Yeah. The latest, until before adhan of Dhuhr. Until just before adhan of Dhuhr. And if you're used to praying it and you missed it and you want to make it up, you could do that too. That works. Inshallah, Allah will accept from you. If you want to make it up after its time, like we said, just as you make up a fard prayer, you could make up a sunnah prayer. Good? Good? All right, we're almost done here. The other sunnah that we have is, we're almost done for today. Actually, we have Taraweeh, we have Qiyamul Layl, we have Tahiyyatul Masjid, we have Sunnatul Wudu. Sunnatul Wudu, straightforward. It's a recommended prayer to do every time you make wudu. There's a hadith about it where the Prophet ﷺ asked Bilal, why do I hear your footsteps in Jannah? So he said, I can't think of anything except that whenever I make wudu, I pray 2 rak'ahs. This is called Sunnatul Wudu. We also have Sunnat Tahiyyatul Masjid, and this is done as regard for the masjid, as respect for the masjid. That I don't do anything, I don't sit down in the masjid until I pray 2 rak'ahs. And if you sit down, you'll miss out on it, right? If you sit down, you'll miss out on it. Any prayer that you do can count towards this, by the way, even if it's a fard prayer. Like say if they're praying Dhuhr, I didn't get to pray Tahiyyat al-Masjid. Can I have the intention of Tahiyyah as I'm praying Dhuhr? Yeah, because it's only meant to be a sunnah that's out of respect for the masjid. Meaning that I'm not going to sit down and do anything else until I pray. This is going to happen with a sunnah prayer or a fard prayer. You guys got it? So, and then you could pray Tahiyyat al-Masjid at any time when you come inside the masjid. What about a prohibited prayer time? There's an exception here. We're going to talk about this when we talk about the prohibited prayer times. So keep that with you, inshallah. So that's Sunnat al-Wudu and Tahiyyat al-Masjid. Taraweeh and Qiyamul Layl, I'll leave them till next time, inshallah. All right? Jazakumullah khair. Subhanakallah wa hamdik. Nashhadu an la ilaha illa ant. Nastaghfiruka wa natubu ilayk. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah.